don't know if some of you have also encountered the reality of having to sort of limit the drop downs of a list field based on its association with another table. A very common place where we find this is, for example, when you want to load the regions of only one country. And so I'm going to show you how I've achieved this. I realize there are many ways to do this, and yet this is how I've done it. Okay, so to start off, I have a component I could use as an illustration called job tracking. Now in this component, obviously I have a client area, and then I have already loaded, if I go to admin views, you'd see there's country and regions. Now I'm going to illustrate it on the basis of country and regions, but you obviously can change the field concepts and replace it with other tables, but nonetheless this is what I'll be using, and I'm going to show you how I implemented it inside the client's view, because that's basically where most of the work is done. Okay, so I'm going to open the client view. And then I'm going to look in there are two places we want to look at: JavaScript as well as the PHP area. Now I have in various previous tutorials explained some of the Ajax functionality in Component Builder, but I realized not all of you might have watched all the tutorials, so I'll explain some of that again briefly. But having said that, we're first going to look at what we really want to achieve. Like I've said, when you load a user, so let me go show you that. So when you start with a client, you would like to choose a country and then have it load only that country's regions. That's basically what you want to do. Furthermore, you want to make sure that when it does that and you unselect the country, it also unselects the region. And so there are various things we want to achieve here. And so in JavaScript, I'm going to show you how I've done that. I'm just illustrating at the moment one country. Maybe I should go put on a few more, so just hold on for a second there. Okay, so now if I look, it says Australia. If I click on Australia, you see that it doesn't load any regions. In fact, it says create a region. If I choose Namibia, it says select a region, and so there's two regions already created. Now, as you know by now, there is this button in some of the drop downs which are being added by saying true to the button, and so it's very helpful for either creating or editing existing regions. So if you're sort of selecting a country where there isn't any regions set yet, it basically tells you to create one, and you can then create a region for this country. And what's nice, if you click on this create, you can then simply create your region, save and close. So I don't know an Australia region, so I'm just going to call it region for now, and save and close, and go back to creating a client. If I now select Australia, you see that it's got region. So there we go. Problem solved. And that's really what I'm going to demonstrate how I did that. So let's get started. On a JavaScript side of things, I first have two variables. I actually could call them both var. That doesn't matter. One is an object, and one is simply where we are going to store, if there is a value already set, we are going to store that value. Then on document ready, I simply, oh yes, before I continue, creating the fields, I obviously make it bring all the regions to the page. I don't want it to leave some regions unloaded, how can I say. Instead, what I rather do is I parse those regions into this variable and then only put those regions that are actually part of this country back into the list of drop-down options. That's really what I'm doing. So that's what you also see happening here. Is first thing I'm doing is I am doing a for each on the regions options, and then I'm getting the value, I'm putting it in the key, and I'm getting the text, I'm putting it in text, and then I'm adding it to regions, simply as you would load it in any array there. And then I am also getting the value of the set region, and I'm adding that to region, and then I'm setting the function get region. Now the get region function is down here. It's this area. So first thing we do is we load a little loading show. Now the loading show, or rather this class ID actually, is loaded on the page by default when you set this fade effect on add. Then it by default loads that class with a nice spinner, and so I'm basically, if the loading process takes long, I'm sort of stopping the user from doing anything and waiting for that spinner. You don't need to add that. Then I am finding the options for the region, and I'm removing them, all of them. Then I'm triggering an update. Now this update that we are triggering here, list ZT, is a Joomla function, and it's actually possibly going to change in the future, so keep that in the back of your mind. If things break, it possibly is happening right here, because this, as you know, the list field is dynamically generated by Joomla, and so we're literally telling it to draw that list again, but after having removed everything. Okay, now we are looking at the country. So up till here we've only touched the region. Now we get the country value, the one that is selected, and we add it to country. We then call the server at this point, and the only thing we are giving the server is the country ID. So up here we have the country ID, we have our get URL, which in our case is get region, is the task. We're checking that the token is on the page, we're checking that the country ID is not 0, and we then basically loading the request and shooting off an AJAX. We're doing it this way because obviously we want to do some things after we've got the result, which is this done, and then we set region. Now we throw the result into set region, we hide the load, and then we do some house cleaning on the button. So that button also gets pampered with, and I'll show you the region button correction that we're doing down here. And you can copy this code, test that out. Obviously you would update this to whatever field you're trying to limit, and only do that after set region. Now we're going to set region. Set region is quite simple, mainly because we already done most of the work with the result being returned, and so I'll show you the PHP that returns this result in a moment. So in set region we get an array, we check if the array is there, and then we append, simply as you would with any list selection. We append the value, but now since we are, oh yes, another thing, I realize I'm almost skipping it. This select region is a JavaScript variable that I'm setting through PHP, which I'll show you in a later stage. And basically, it's just a string that says that it should select the region. And if there is no array returned, we basically just use the other variable, create a region, which is also just a string. Okay, so now over here, we are going to iterate over the array, and we are using the ID, and we're checking whether the ID is in regions. If it's in regions, we append the ID as a value, and as you remember, in regions we saved the text as well as the ID, and so that is how we get the text, simply adding it in there. I know we could have done that in the PHP, but I felt let's let the browser help us with some of the lifting. So we got the regions there. If it's a huge table, you might want to approach this differently. Eventually, we are checking whether the ID and the region equals. Since if it does, we want to ensure to set that region value. So as you remember previously, we found the region value and we stored it into region. Just to, in case the value was set before and saved, now the person is looking through different countries, but when he again selects the country that previously was saved, we want to make sure that his previous region is also shown as the selected value. And so that's simply what we're doing here. Then, after everything is done, we again trigger this list update, which is the same as what was triggered there. And that basically sets the regions list again afresh. And then only do we run this little bit of housekeeping, which does the region button. Okay, now the region button is actually a JavaScript that is added because of the list field. So if your specific list field was set to have no button, you could simply leave this out. If it was set to have a button, then this is usually the name of the button would be this area before the JForm underscore. This part of the name would be the first part of the name of the button function, and then the last part would be button. So that's how you'd know, and you can obviously on the page let it execute and search for this function if you're unsure, but that's how you would usually run the button correction. And that's basically how the JavaScript looks to achieve this. Okay, there's a little bit more housework necessary, and that's what I said before. This area of JavaScript can actually include PHP. That area cannot, because that's just pure JavaScript file, whereas this is JavaScript added to a PHP file. So here we can add some PHP, and that's where we get the select region and create region. Now I know there's another way to do this in JavaScript itself, so forgive me for being so sloppy. Anyway, then there's this function, which basically when the admin form on change of the country field is, when that event occurs, we want to execute get region, so that's done every time that field is changed. That is the extra little bit of script that you need to add, these two, if you are gonna copy this down exactly the same. Just another note, that will obviously then execute this function, which is the same function that we are executing on the page load. We don't need to execute this simply because that has already been done on the page load. So that's all the JavaScript that you need to add. Now let's go look at the PHP. As you should know by now, you do not need to add the PHP to the same admin view. Since all the Ajax methods are all added to one file in the component called Ajax, the model as well as the controller is the Ajax model and controller. So if you compile the component, you can unzip it and go to the model and to the controller either in the back end or in the front end, whereas now it will be in the back end, and it's under models. You look there, you'll see there's an Ajax model, and all of the back end Ajax methods gets added to this one model. And so this area is what takes care of the model, and this area here takes care of the controller. So we're basically saying the value's name is country, the task is get region. If no value is passed, it's null, and it must be an integer that is passed, and the method name is get region, and it must be a logged in user. That's as simple as it is. That takes care of the whole controller setup. Then here we have the method called getRegion. It gets the ID. It doesn't need to sanitize it again since the controller already did that. You can go look at the controller to see the implementation. So we're simply getting the factory. The database factory passes us the database. We set up a query. We say that we are looking for the IDs of in the region that are published, and basically where the country. Now this is again where you need to sort of make your changes. We want the names of the regions, or the IDs instead, sorry, of the regions on their association with the country. So obviously then in the region table we have a field, a column that is called country, and it has an ID in it, so that each region is linked to a country. So whatever table you're targeting, the association would be then this country, and it obviously, me being paranoid, we just add the integer in there again. Set the query, execute it, check if we have a value, and if we do, we simply return the load column function, which returns the IDs in an array. There we go, done, finished. And there we return false if no value was found. And it's as simple as that. That's all the PHP you need, and that returns the PHP to our JavaScript, and the JavaScript does the rest. Okay, well, I hope this will be very helpful and help you to sort of sort your drop downs. I didn't spend much time on explaining that. Maybe I should. So let me give a quick run over of that. The field that we are focusing on is this country and region field, and they are both custom, right? So I've already done tutorials on how to set up a custom field. I'm not going to spend too much on this, but just for a reminder, let's open region. So in region, we're simply saying the button is true, and we select the region. You can obviously update the view name dynamically in the description. And here we're doing some PHP. You could put all of this PHP in just type PHP1, you know, like without adding it to the 19th placement. But like I've done, I've actually used every area. I like making the code look as if it was written and not computer generated. And then I'm adding the options, and so this is just a simple basic custom field. There isn't even any JavaScript in here. So I've done everything basically in the model, the PHP as well as the JavaScript, sorry, not in the model, in the backend admin view. And I think that is because I want to use this field maybe in other views with different different association. So I don't tend to use the script area maybe as one might expect. Okay, so that's quickly looking at filtering a drop-down list selection, custom list selection, via JavaScript and Ajax therefore. Now if you are targeting a table of another component which you're not having the control over the actual field names, it should work the same way. If there's, as long as there is a field of association within the table that you'd like to filter, you could write that PHP, find the values and filter it. Thanks for watching.